is LBC. From Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, very good evening. It's 8 on LBC. Welcome to Wednesday's Cross Question. On the panel with me are Andrew Rosindell, Conservative Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister and MP for Romford. He's sitting over to my right. Tessa Dunlop, Dr. Tessa Dunlop, historian and broadcaster, the co-host with me of the global podcast Where Politics Meets History. To my left, Samuel Kasumu, social entrepreneur. He was a civil society advisor to Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. And next to him, Ben Maguire, making his debut on the show, Liberal Democrat, Shadow Attorney General and MP for North Cornwall. They're here to answer your questions on 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. And of course, you can watch us on Global Player, the LBC app or the LBC YouTube channel.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app. This is LBC.
Let's start off with a text question from Benjamin, who says, is just arresting people for saying anti-Semitic things on marches enough to clamp down on this kind of hatred? Should the marches just be banned altogether now? OK, Andrew Rosindell.
Well, I believe in freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And of course, throughout our history, people have demonstrated against injustice or things that they don't agree with. And that's part of what makes Britain the free nation that we are, and I defend that. However, there are those who go too far. There are those who overstep the mark. And I worry that the law has not been applied equally to all types of protesters. We're seeing some protesters seemingly get away with vile behaviour and antagonistic behaviour, but others not doing so and being arrested very quickly. So I think the important thing here is to have equality in terms of how the law is applied. And I think there's a lot of questions as to whether that's been happening in terms of the recent demonstrations we've been seeing. I do think that those who are calling for global intifada, well, I think that's worrying. That's inciting potential violence. So there is a case against those who incite potential violence. But we have to apply the law carefully because we don't want a free society to turn into an authoritarian one whereby people don't feel that they can express their views freely and demonstrate in the free society we've always cherished.
But isn't it unfair to put this on the police? Because the law is a little bit sort of wet in this regard, isn't it? In that the police have to decide whether one chant is sort of encouraging violence, but another one isn't. I mean, if they're chanting from the river to the sea, you could also say, I mean, possibly that's a ratchet down from encouraging a global intifada, but it's still effectively saying that the state of Israel and Jews in the area should either be eliminated or moved.
Well, I think some of these chants are actually suggesting that there shouldn't be Jewish people in Israel. I mean, from the river to the sea sounds to me like they want the Jewish people out. And I don't like that at all. And I think that is inciting hatred towards the Jewish people. And I think the idea of a global intifada as well. I mean, what does that mean? Does that mean that everyone in every town and city across the globe is now going to go out and protest and make life difficult for the Jewish people? I think that's what it sounds like it's trying to do. So, yes, protesting against things you don't like is one thing, but actually harming people's daily lives and people's families and living in a safe community, that cannot be tolerated. So the police do have to make judgments, but it has to be applied evenly and equally across all protests. But I think the problem is that some people are protesting constantly. I think that
that's the way of making a point, isn't it?
Look, you can't protest constantly to the exclusion of everybody else. Other people have a protest and that's it. They don't go back the following weekend and have the same protest again and again and again.
But maybe that's what I did wrong with my Remain marches. Maybe that's
resources are taken out of boroughs like mine to police in London. So we don't get police in Romford because they're policing all these protests in London. That's not fair either. So we don't get police on the streets.
Right, let's go to a text question from Sharon in Folkestone. Did the panel all clap the carers back in the COVID years? In light of what they're doing this week, do they regret doing so? Andrew.
So I think it's a breach of trust. I think that doctors and those that work in the National Health Service, like teachers and others in the public sector, get those jobs because they are trusted to do a job for the British people. They're paid for by the taxpayer. They're not in the private sector. They don't have to make a profit or justify their jobs at the end of the day because they're funded out of the taxpayer's purse. And so for them to withdraw the service they're paid to do, particularly in the health service, the junior doctors, potentially putting people's lives at risk, I think is quite frankly shameful. They should not be striking, but you've got to say, the Labour government, once again, they've given them huge pay rise without any productivity deal. No, I'm sorry. There was no productivity. If you give someone a big pay rise, you at least sort out some sort of increase in productivity. They didn't do that. And now they come back for more only a year later. Frankly, it's a disgrace. They should not be striking and they should not be putting people's lives at risk.
Yeah. Ben.
Absolutely incredible that Andrew, a member of the former Conservative government, that wasted
I was never a member of the government.
£15 billion in COVID contracts were wasted under your watch.
I'm sorry, I was never in the government.
£15 billion under the Conservative government was wasted. And now you're saying that doctors going on strike because they want more pay is a disgrace. I think you need
Andrew, would you like to respond to that vicious attack from the Liberal Democrats?
It was ill-informed because Ben wasn't an MP at the time and he didn't have to sit in the House of Commons and deal with the immediate crisis that we were facing. And any government, no matter what party was in power at the time, had to make very swift decisions very quickly. And yes, it costs a lot of money. For the record, actually, I wasn't a member of the government. I was a backbencher, but I voted against all the lockdowns and all the restrictions after the first round of lockdowns because I didn't believe that it was the sensible thing to do. I didn't think it was necessary. There's extreme measures and now we're in huge debt because of it. So I was very critical of the government at the time, and you can check my speeches at that time, Ben, if you like. So I'm independently minded on this, and I do think a lot of money was wasted. There's no doubt about that.
Sounds like we're in agreement then.
Well, I hope so, because, I lived through it, and it was a dreadful thing to have to deal with as an MP, having constituents, stuck on boats and stuck in all kinds of places around the world, not being able to get home, and people worrying about their relatives in care homes. It was a horrific period in our history. But at the end of the day, you have to deal with it if you're in government. And so mistakes were made. Yeah. No one got it right on everything on this.
Sam. Kai says, today left-wing candidate Andrea Egan was elected as the General Secretary of Britain's biggest union, Unison. How significant do the panel think this is for the Labour Party and our politics more broadly? Now, she won with 60% of the vote and she was thrown out of the Labour Party back in 2022 after the party said she'd shared articles on social media from Socialist Appeal, an organisation banned by Labour. So Christina McAnee, who's a regular guest on this programme, she is out.
What do you think, Andrew?
Well, I have no idea.
Sorry, are you coming back?
He was looking at me, but he was looking at me. It was just a polite way.
What I do know is the left...
Andrew, do speak.
Well, I will. Thank you, Tessa, for giving me the opportunity.
It's my pleasure.
But no, I think the left are very splintered in this country now. Very splintered. You have the Jeremy Corbyn bunch, whoever they're going to be, Greens, Labour Party very divided. They're not a happy bunch. You can see that at the moment. So inevitably, a lot of trade unions are going to feel disillusioned. Where Unison will go under the new leadership, I have no idea. I don't really study the Labour Party that closely. What I do know is that politics generally in this country is very fragmented, and no one can predict how all this is going to play out in the next two to 3 years. But I do think that the Labour Party, the trust it was given at the last election, has blown it, and I think that they're going to hemorrhage support in all sorts of directions. And I think
hemorrhaging more on the left,
yeah, I think so, and I think the trade unions will reflect this.
Text question from James. Brief answers on this one. Kelly Badenoch told you she wants the BBC to win against Trump. Do you all,
to be honest,
Andrew?
Well, the BBC needs to be impartial and it needs to present the news as it is. And I think people around the world respect the BBC. And when they do things like splicing clips of President Trump to make it look like he said something which he hasn't, that clearly is wrong and should be condemned. Now, of course, I don't want the BBC to pay £10 billion to Donald Trump, because my constituents would finish up getting the bill for that. And the licence fee is already really in question, whether it's something that should continue in today's era. Without another £10 billion having to be paid, it'd probably bankrupt the BBC, probably wouldn't exist. It'd probably collapse if it had to pay that sort of money. So, of course, I don't want that. And Kemming's absolutely right to say that we want the BBC not to lose this case, but equally so, I want the BBC to be professional and not left-wing biased organisation,
well,
which
apologised.
a lot of my constituents think it is now. They watch GB News now, I have to say.
I'm sure they never make any mistakes, Andrew.
BBC.
I'm sure they've never made a mistake at GB News.
Tessa.
That's interesting. This is Andrew on my right, who began this show worrying about double standards in policing. I'm still a bit befuddled as to what those double standards are. And now you're talking about a lack of impartiality within the BBC, given the extent, the size of its output. This was an error, undoubtedly, splicing Trump together. Heaven forfend, they made a mistake. But I don't think in the same breath you can compare the BBC
Tessa,
with GB News.
The BBC is taxpayer funded.
Yes, I
GB
know.
News is not. You cannot compare the two.
I know, but what GB News does is
bite the hand that feeds you, Tessa.
they're not feeding me properly. What GB News does is it serves your right-leaning clientele in Essex.
That's a free speech channel.
Yes, with the messaging they want to hear.
They even let you go on it.
They do.
On the subject of Donald Trump, we have a question from Carlo in Highbury. What's the point in trying to do deals with Trump when he just goes back on them all the time? Is there any point in trying to do business with him? Now, I think what he's referring to there is this £31 billion tech prosperity deal with the US, which has been suspended this week, while The Guardian has also reported that the separate agreement to avoid tariffs on the sales of medicines lacks any legal basis beyond the headlines which the two countries put out in their respective press releases at the start of this month. Andrew Rosindell.
So we have a very weak government, a very weak Prime Minister, desperate to look like they're getting these trade deals all over the world without examining the detail, and that is exactly what has happened. So Sir Keir Starmer comes to the House of Commons and talks about all these great trade deals that he's getting and how we failed to do it in government. Well, the truth is a trade deal cannot be done overnight, and you have to examine the details before you sign an MRU, which gives an impression we've got a great trade deal. In fact, the fine details have not been gone through. So I blame entirely the current government on this. Of course, America will look after America's interests. I only wish we had a government that was looking after Britain's interests.
OK, let's go to our fun question, shall we, which I don't think I've given you any notice of at all. It is here. This is a very simple one. What are your panel's Christmas traditions? Andrew?
So, as an MP, I've established my own tradition in Romford. We have carols around the Christmas tree where I invite all the local scouts, the churches, the schools, the community groups to come to Margaret Thatcher House in Romford.
Excellent.
And we sing carols around the Christmas tree.
Very good.
And we have mulled wine and mince pies. It's not political. It's for the whole community to come together to celebrate Christmas and to uphold our Christian heritage, which I think in the country we're living in today, it's very important that we hold true to those Christian traditions.
By the way, Andrew's answer was solid. I liked your answer.
What, singing around a Christmas tree and upholding
everything about it?
Holding hands. Yeah.
Will Tom Robinson be joining me?
I wish I lived. Oh, come on! I wish I lived in Romford.
I'm not going to reply to that. So in Romford, we have many churches and many organisations, and we come together to celebrate Christmas in unity. And I think that our constitution, our laws, our monarchy is based on the Christian foundations. And I think as a parliamentarian, I see it's part of my duty to defend those traditions. And I think that we should depoliticise Christmas and make it an occasion for everyone to enjoy. And that's why I have an event to which I invite literally everybody, regardless of politics, even Liberal Democrats.
Oh, wow.
Even Tessa.